Have you ever spent your whole life searching for something, only to realize it was never lost? There's a certain kind of exhaustion that isn't physical, it's spiritual. It's the weariness that comes after reading every book you can get your hands on, meditating for hours, listening to countless teachings, and still feeling like something's missing. Like there's a hole inside you that nothing seems to fill, a quiet ache that whispers, "There must be more than this." I know that feeling well. For years, I thought enlightenment was some grand achievement, an explosion of light, a blissful high, a final answer to all questions. But one ordinary morning, sitting in silence with nothing left to chase, something unexpected happened. I didn't attain anything. I just stopped running. And in that stillness, I noticed maybe what I was looking for was never far away. Maybe it was here all along, hidden beneath all the striving. Enlightenment, it turns out, isn't something you gain. It's what remains when you no longer need to gain anything. In today's video, I'm not here to give you a new belief or a technique or a secret key to awakening. I just want to share something more human, what it feels like when the noise settles and you realize the peace you've been searching for has been waiting patiently inside you all along. So let's take a breath together and see what happens when we stop searching, even just for a moment. Because maybe, just maybe, you were never really lost, only distracted from the truth that you were already home. Chapter 1. When there's no one left to be enlightened. What if the person chasing awakening is the very thing blocking it? We often imagine enlightenment as something that happens to us. I will become enlightened, I will reach nirvana. But have you ever stopped to ask, who is this I that's trying so hard? I remember a moment during a silent retreat. I had been meditating for hours, trying to calm my mind to reach some deeper state. But all I could feel was tension, in my body, in my breath, in my thoughts. And then suddenly it hit me, not as a thought, but as a clear realization. The me trying to reach enlightenment was the only thing standing in the way. It was like watching a dog chase its own tail. Every effort to get closer only spun me further from stillness. The more I tried to be free, the more trapped I became. That's when I understood something simple, yet quietly profound. Enlightenment doesn't happen to someone. It happens when there's no one left demanding it. It's not a grand event. It's not a badge of honor. It's more like mist lifting after a long rain, soft, unannounced, and absolutely ordinary. You don't become someone new, you just stop holding so tightly to who you thought you were. There's no spotlight, no final ceremony, just this exact moment minus the story you've wrapped around it. The idea that you need to change disappears, and in its place, a gentle, spacious awareness that was always there, quietly waiting. Some people call this emptiness. But it doesn't feel hollow, it feels like freedom. Like the moment you finally take off shoes that were 2 sizes too small and realize you can breathe again. And once that burden of becoming enlightened falls away, something shifts. Not in the sky, not in the world, but in the way you see it. Everything is still here, your job, your family, your body's aches and joys, but they're no longer proof of your value. They just are. And that's where the path starts to open, when there's nothing left to prove and no one left to pretend. So if enlightenment isn't about adding anything, what is it about? Let's move into the next chapter, where we explore what happens when you stop trying to become and start remembering who you've always been. Chapter 2. Not becoming, but remembering. What if you've never been separate from truth, only distracted from it? We live in a world that constantly tells us to become something. Be better, be wiser, be more spiritual. Even the idea of enlightenment often gets wrapped in that same pressure. Something to achieve, to work toward, to earn. But what if awakening isn't about becoming anything at all? I used to think I was climbing some invisible mountain. Every meditation session, every moment of mindfulness, another step up. I imagined that one day I'd reach the top and finally feel whole. But the higher I tried to go, the more exhausted I felt. Not because the peak was too far, but because there was no mountain. One morning, sitting by the window with a cup of tea, I watched the steam rise and disappear. No striving. No trying, just rising then fading back into the air. And it hit me, not as an idea, but as a soft, clear feeling. Maybe I don't need to become anything. Maybe I just need to remember what I already am. You see, we forget. We forget that we were born whole, that our awareness, before thought, before language, is already free. We cover it with stories, titles, traumas, dreams, fears, layers upon layers, until we no longer recognize the simplicity underneath. But every once in a while, something breaks through. A moment of stillness, a deep breath, a laugh with no reason. And for a second, the stories fall away and you feel it, that quiet, wordless knowing. Oh, I remember this. That's what awakening feels like. Not a firework, but a homecoming. Not an upgrade, but a return. You don't find yourself by chasing light. You remember yourself by resting in what has always been here. And the most beautiful part. There's nothing mystical you need to do. The path isn't paved with special techniques or secret mantras. It's walked by pausing, by listening, by letting go of the belief that you are incomplete. Because the moment you stop trying to become someone else, you remember who you truly are. But remembering isn't always easy. The world will keep pulling you back into roles and masks. So how do we stay connected to that deeper space? In the next chapter, we'll talk about what it means to embrace the mystery, not with fear, but with the quiet confidence that comes from no longer needing to know everything. Chapter 3. The beauty of not knowing. What if peace doesn't come from having all the answers, but from no longer needing them? There was a time when I thought freedom meant understanding everything. I devoured spiritual books, chased after mystical concepts, tried to piece together the universe like a puzzle. I believed that if I could just figure it all out, who I am, why I'm here, how it all works, then maybe, just maybe, I could finally rest. But the more I tried to know, the more tangled my mind became. And then one evening I was sitting by a lake. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, and the sky held that soft, violet blue stillness. I wasn't thinking about anything profound. I wasn't meditating. I was just there, watching ripples, feeling the cool air. In that moment, something unexpected happened. I felt completely okay with not knowing. I didn't need an answer for why the sky was beautiful. I didn't need to define what I was feeling. I just let it all be without analysis. And the silence that followed, it wasn't empty, it was alive. I felt more connected, more awake than in any moment of deep thought. Not because I had discovered a new truth, but because I had stopped trying to discover one. There's something sacred about not knowing. It's like a wide, open field with no fences, room for everything to move, to breathe, to just be. When we drop the need to explain, life becomes poetry again. A mystery to be felt, not solved. In Buddhism, this is sometimes called beginner's mind, the kind of awareness that doesn't cling to conclusions. It doesn't shut the door with answers. It keeps them open with wonder. We often think wisdom is about accumulation. But real wisdom is more like subtraction. You take away what you don't need, the assumptions, the control, the certainty, and what's left is clarity, not because you know more, but because you're finally present. And in that presence, there's a kind of intimacy with life that no answer can ever give. So maybe the next step on this journey isn't to seek more understanding, but to embrace the spaces between our thoughts, where something wordless is waiting. In the next chapter, we'll explore that space more deeply. We'll talk about what happens when we stop chasing spiritual experiences and simply allow life as it is to be our greatest teacher. Chapter 4. Awakening without striving. What if trying to awaken is the very thing that keeps you asleep? This is one of the greatest paradoxes on the spiritual path. The harder you try to awaken, the further you drift from it. I spent years believing that if I just tried harder, woke up earlier, meditated longer, read deeper teachings, I'd eventually earn my way to enlightenment. But the more effort I poured in, the more restless I became. I began to confuse discipline with control, devotion with pressure. Then one day, out of sheer exhaustion, I stopped. Not out of wisdom, just burnout. And in that pause, something happened, not dramatic, not blissful, just honest. A quiet presence emerged. The very presence that had been buried beneath my striving. I realized that awakening isn't a trophy handed out at the end of effort. It's what gently surfaces when effort softens. Like a reflection appearing clearly in still water, only when you stop stirring. We live in a world obsessed with achievement, even in spiritual circles. There's an unspoken message. Meditate like this, chant like that, follow this teacher, and then you'll get there. But true awakening is not a destination. It's the absence of trying to arrive. It's the moment you stop reaching and suddenly you're already home. This doesn't mean we stop practicing or give up intention. It means we shift our relationship with practice, from striving to surrender, from fixing ourselves to befriending ourselves. We begin to walk not to escape the moment, but to deepen into it. I once heard a Zen teacher say, "Enlightenment is an accident, but practice makes you accident-prone." That stuck with me, because practice is still valuable, but not to force awakening. Rather, to create the inner space where grace can land. So what do we actually do? We show up. We breathe. We feel what's here without resistance. We walk through our life with the radical courage to stop improving ourselves and start remembering the quiet awareness that never needed fixing. And in that space, unguarded, unpolished, awakening comes not as an achievement, but as a homecoming. So maybe the door to freedom was never locked. Maybe the only key you needed was the willingness to stop pushing it open. And with that, we return full circle. In the final chapter, let's bring it all together. Let's talk about what it truly means to come home, to stop seeking, to soften the grip, and to discover that peace was never somewhere else. It was simply waiting for you to notice it. What if the treasure you've been searching for was never hidden? After all the striving, all the questions, all the longing, you may come to realize something quietly revolutionary. There was nothing to attain. You were never far from peace. You were simply looking everywhere but here. Enlightenment isn't a reward for perfect practice. It's not the result of becoming someone better. It's what's left when the trying stops, when you stop needing to fix yourself. When you stop chasing the next answer, it's the moment you realize you are already enough. The Buddha never said, "I achieved something." He said, "I am awake." That awakening wasn't an achievement, it was a remembering, a return. A gentle falling away of illusion. You don't have to travel to distant lands or master complicated teachings. You only need to pause, breathe, feel what's here, and notice what's been with you all along. You thought you were lost, but you were always home. You thought you were broken, but you were always whole. You thought you had to become someone, but you were already everything. So maybe the search can end not in failure, but in peace. Because the door was never locked. You just had to stop pushing to see it's been open all along.